Welcome to Back Talk, the premier podcast from Successful Black Parenting Magazine, featuring in-depth conversations and expert insights on crucial topics for Black families. We are ranked one of the top 4 Black family podcasts on FeedSpot, and we're now number 1 on Million Podcasts as well. I'm your host, Janice Robinson Celeste, and now Successful Black Parenting Magazine has an interactive community of like-minded Black parents called Black Parenting Academy, where you can converse and post questions, comments, wins, and concerns in a safe space. And I'll be sharing that link throughout the show. So look for it, copy it, join it. It's free to join. Just go in there and it's like our own Facebook for Black parents. So get in there, start a conversation. But let me ask you this question about today's show. What if the very systems designed to support children with autism are actually leaving Black families behind? Yeah. How do we change that story for our kids? Well, we are about to find out. So stay tuned.
This is Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine, the most listened to podcast for parents by parents.
Hello, successful Black parents. Thank you for tuning in to Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. We are your go-to podcast talk show for parents, and we are live. And that means you can post your questions in the comment section of our Facebook or YouTube pages. And I will actually put your question or comment on air if it's appropriate. Don't forget to share our podcast with your friends. Shout it out to your followers, because sharing is truly caring. And don't forget to use hashtag BackTalk when you post. I like to go on Instagram and see hashtag BackTalk, and it's like really flourishing. So, make me happy. Go do that. Today in the studio, I have with me Alicia Simpson Watts. Alicia specializes in applied behavioral analyst and autism spectrum disorder, and she has appeared on or has been quoted in, because she's bad, I'm telling y'all, in Today's Parent, HuffPost, Self, Fortune, Good Housekeeping, U.S. News and World Report, Autism Parenting Magazine, and now guess what? She's on Back Talk Podcast. So welcome to the show, Alicia.
Hey, welcome. Hello, everyone.
Well, I gave you the short introduction, how awesome you are, but can you introduce yourself and share what drives your passion for helping Black families navigating autism?
Of course. So, as Janice already mentioned, I'm Alicia. A little bit about my background is I'm the Executive Clinical Director and founder of Collaborative ABA Services here in Middletown, Connecticut. And as she mentioned, we specialize in applied behavior analysis therapy, as well as working with children diagnosed with autism ages 2 to 18. In addition to being a provider working with children on the spectrum, I'm also a parent of a child with autism. And what drives me to helping support Black families is there was an article that was released. It was way back in 2023. And the name of the article was by, I believe, Child Mind Institute. And it was about autism spectrum disorder in Black children. And in that article, it was a study, and it talked about the diagnosis of autism was delayed about at least 3 years after the parents expressed concerns. Mm-hmm. And the story or the article also talked about how Black children were more often diagnosed with like mood disorders or developmental disabilities before being diagnosed with autism, which further delayed them getting access to treatment. And when I read that story, it resonated with me as a parent, because I was like, oh my gosh, like this is my story. My daughter was 7 when she got her diagnosis of autism. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the study, it said Black parents where the diagnosis was delayed at least 3 years after the parents expressed their concern. Our concern started since preschool.
Mm-hmm. And so, she was 7.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, we definitely got to do better as a community, for our Black community, because that right there for me was like a red flag and was like a wake up call.
Yeah. You know what? And I read that not only is it a diagnosis delayed for Black children, but also for girls. Like yes. Girls even later, sometimes even into their teens.
Yes.
So yeah, we got to do better. Definitely. So now that you told us about all of your Black girl magic and what you do, I want you to tell us one personal or fun fact about you that many people might not know about that you can tell us on air.
Yeah. So one fun fact is that I'm actually a really good cook. I just don't
Okay.
share it.
Okay, I'm coming over. Go ahead for dinner.
Of course.
What do you like to cook? What's your favorite meal?
My favorite meal, honestly, I would have to say is Alfredo. Fettuccine
Oh,
Alfredo.
really?
Yes.
Italian food is dangerous for me. It puts weight on me like this, I swear. But I love it. I ain't gonna
It,
lie.
it'll
Love
do
me,
it to you every time.
love me some Italian food. Okay, let's get into this show. So many parents say to family members, or, and I know I've seen family members or community members might downplay their child's differences. Like, oh, he'll grow out of it. Oh, she just needs some discipline. You know what they mean by discipline. How can parents respond to those dismissive comments without burning bridges?
Yeah, and when parents make those comments, or family members or friends, it's coming more from like a place of love, and more like traditional values. And I think, a way to respond would be like, some examples might be, I hear you, but right now, we got this. Or
Mhm.
another example might be, I appreciate you looking out for us. We got a plan in place right now, and it's kind of working for us. So it's like you're establishing those boundaries, but you're not quite burning that bridge.
I love that. And still polite, you
Yes.
know, because
Yes,
there's some
sir.
things that we want to say, we can't say. But yeah, so that's a polite way of doing it. So if you're a parent out there and you're listening to this right now, please comment, whether you're commenting under the replay or the live show today, comment on what your experiences have been with this. What have people told you? I've seen even parents, like a lot of times it's often the fathers that don't accept it, like, oh, he's fine or whatever. How does a mom deal with that when it's the might be the dad, or the opposite, that it's the dad noticing it and maybe it's the mom in denial? How do we handle it when it's someone that close to you?
It honestly, it's a tough road. And, as a parent, you got to trust your instincts and your guts. And, they might, some of it might be a lack of education or awareness. And it might be just having that conversation and educating them, or bringing in a professional that can provide education and support, kind of like a neutral party, to kind of say, hey, and also maybe giving them something like a visual or some type of pamphlet with signs and symptoms of autism, and maybe having them look at it and be like, oh, wow, that is our child. Because
Mhm.
sometimes, giving them the information and educating them can be helpful.
So that's where they can start to find some information that shows symptoms of
Yep.
autism. What are some of the symptoms?
One of them, or universal, that I hear a lot is avoiding eye contact. But sometimes, every kid on the spectrum is different. There are some kids that actually do provide eye contact, so that it's not always a symptom for every child, but it is common. You might have that kid that prefers to play by themselves, or you might have that kid that, what we call, doesn't have any functional play skills. They might have some cars, and instead of like playing with the cars, like racing the cars, they might line the cars up by color,
Mhm.
and that's their way of playing with the cars. Or you have a kid, another sign is they have difficulty making friends. They might not respond to their name. And a lot of times when I'm doing autism evaluations, one thing that stands out for me is when a parent says that the child was making gains in their language and communication when they were like younger. They were saying mama, dada, and then all of a sudden there was a regression around the age of 2, and then the child stopped talking. So like a regression in skills and developmental delays are like some of the main things where I'm like, there might be
Yeah,
something here.
I can relate to that one with my grandson. So, yeah, I wonder what that is. It seems like something interferes at that moment, like, and we still don't know what that is, right?
No, and they're still doing research to even find out, what is the cause of autism.
Right, right. Oh, I hope we get closer because I'm curious because I also see a lot of autistic children with like unique abilities, like
Yeah.
I've never seen before. Like, and people, like, I still got in a conversation, and so many people that don't have experience with autistic kids that don't believe it, that they can do some amazing things that we can't explain. Like my grandson taught himself to read at 2. No
Mm-hmm.
one taught him that. We weren't even reading a lot of books to him. So how does he learn to read? Um,
Mm-hmm.
And right now he's reading a whole grade level above where he is. He just got into first grade. And
Wow.
he's in the second grade reading level. I'm sure he could do better. This is a kid that on his iPad, most kids are playing games. I'm asking what he's doing. He's telling me about continents he looked up in Wikipedia.
Oh
So,
yeah.
in kindergarten.
Yes.
So, is that something that's familiar? Like, does that sound familiar to you?
Oh yes. Yes. So also I find that they may have unusual interests or
Yeah.
skills. Kind of like I'll give you like one example. There was a kiddo that I had did an autism evaluation. He was 3. And what he would do is his interest was to take apart, and I'm not making this up, he would take apart pieces of a vacuum, an actual vacuum, and he would put it back the exact way and it would
Mhm.
work. And
Mhm.
he was 3, and I was like, this isn't normal. Or we had a kid, he was 5, and he literally scripted the whole episode of a cartoon series, word for word. And I was just like,
It's amazing.
I couldn't even remember what I ate the day before. So I'm like, let alone, I'm like,
But
wow.
I'm seeing this, like in online, you see parents posting about the kids, like the photographic memories.
Oh yes.
This one adult, a guy with autism, he builds buildings out of cardboard
Mhm.
that he's seen once, and he'll paint them, and they look like little architectural models.
Uh-huh.
And then this other little boy, there's I forgot the book's name about the coconut tree. I'm gonna slap myself for this. I know this book, but it's these letters that go up a tree and they fall out. And the
Mm.
way they fell, he recreated that cover with his magnetic letters exactly the way the cover is without having to look at the cover of the book.
Mhm.
Um, so that's also amazing. But let's talk about the parents. Like, what's one everyday parenting strategy that can make life smoother for both the parent and the autistic child, especially when it comes to like mealtime or bedtime?
Predictable routines and visual supports are huge. You know, having predictability in their routine, it helps reduce stress for not only the child, but for you as a parent. Because one thing for children on the spectrum, they don't do well with changes in routine. Like that could
Mhm.
be a trigger for a lot of kids. And when we're creating skills, like if we have like a bedtime routine, for example, if they have like a visual schedule so they know what's expected of them, it can even consist of like a task analysis, which is like a task analysis is basically breaking a bigger skill into smaller steps. So like bedtime routine might be first I take a shower, then I brush my teeth, then I read a story, then I go to bed, lights out. And it's like a schedule of what's expected.
No, the schedules work too well sometimes. I laugh
Yeah.
because again, grandson, he would eat us out of house and home with the snacks. He would just keep eating. I think part of it was him being bored because he's so smart. Like just eat all the snacks we had. So I had to make a schedule where it's snack time. Like it's
Mhm.
snack time twice a day, lunch in the middle, breakfast, all these things on here. And he clocks me. Like it's 2:30. I get a snack. And I'm like, and he's sitting there, you see him looking at the schedule. I'm like, God, yeah, okay, yeah. It is 2:30. Okay, go get your snack,
Very
It's
punctual.
10:30. I get a snack, morning snack. I'm like, "Yes, it is." So, they will hold you to it too,
Mhm.
just as you can hold them to taking a shower. I
Yep.
love it. We did do that, so I'm glad we did that right. Let's talk about the kids of autistic, children because or I should say children with autism. I don't like to put labels on people like that, but children with autism,
Mhm.
'cause also my grandson has a sister, my granddaughter. But how can parents support the siblings 'cause who might feel left out or even burdened when so much attention goes to the child with autism?
So one of the things that I recommend is try to incorporate the siblings into activities so they also can feel seen, heard, and also feel helpful. It also I would recommend finding a separate time to spend with them too. So it's
Yeah.
like that you have the time with them, but also with the other child, and it makes it so like everyone feels valued, and then also when they're incorporated into things with their sibling, it also empowers them.
Yeah, I think that's some great advice, some great advice. Now, I did grow up with a my brother had brain damage at birth through lack of oxygen. It was available. He was mentally challenged because of it. And, my parents, all they had to take him back and forth to doctors, evaluations. He had behavior issues because, he couldn't communicate well, blah, blah, blah. All these things happened. And I remember feeling left out. I remember being a sister feeling left out. And, and I think my mom recognized it. So I remember her taking me on a mom-daughter date one day. And it was the best thing. I still remember it to this day. And so it's important what you said, because like I said, here I am. I'm not going to tell you my age, but many decades later.
You
And
look
I
great, by
remember
the
that
way.
mommy-daughter date because she took time out for me for a
Mhm.
change, and I appreciate her for that. So it is important. We don't forget. We do not forget. Church. Okay, so here we go. We're going to dive into some faith and spirituality. But many of our Black families lean heavily on faith communities, and it's nothing wrong with that. I'm not making fun of or anything. It's whoever you decide to worship, and I'm good with that. But how can churches and spiritual leaders support families with autistic children in a way that is affirming?
So first and foremost, I think it's very important that autism is normalized by talking about it openly and reminding the congregation that every child, regardless of disability, is wonderfully made, to kind of help break that stigma. Another thing is creating an inclusive worship space. So kind of like where they have areas for breastfeeding women, creating like some quiet areas or sensory friendly areas for children that might get overstimulated for bright lights or loud noises. Also like incorporating children into activities, and also like supporting, and I think this is also very important, supporting and normalizing access to community resources to help families, because that's another big thing, having that support of saying it's okay to get therapy for your child. Like it's like normalizing that it's okay to seek those supports.
I always am pro giving them a safe space.
Mhm.
I love what some of the amusement parks let them do. Like they let them skip lines knowing they don't have the patience to stay in the line a lot of times. Airports letting you board early, anything that businesses can do
Mhm.
to create these like public spaces to help with the behavior, so that they don't get triggered, and they don't they don't have the patience. It's different. It's a little different. So otherwise you have to find like things for them to do while they wait in lines and know that they can't handle long lines. And
Mhm.
parents also have to, I think, be aware of that. Like, know your child's limitations, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's talk about sensory overloads.
Mhm.
And I can see that. I can see like places like an amusement park causing sensory overload for anyone, especially someone who's autistic, and they pay attention to every little detail. Like I saw a video once where the kid was going through the mall and somebody recreated everything they would look at and see and hear, and it's overwhelming. So, what advice do you have for a parent when their child has a sensory overload or a meltdown in a public place and people are watching? They're judgy.
Yes. First and foremost, you're there to support your child and really not worry about, what others might think. You want to be there for your child in the moment, maybe offer some calming strategies and like remove them from whatever the triggers are. If it's a loud noise, for example, or bright lights, maybe move them to a quieter area, give them access to like headphones or sunglasses if it's too bright. And always remember that meltdown is a form of communication. It's not that they're doing it to misbehave or, to give you a hard time. It's they're communicating a want or a need. And, you can say, like, if you're really concerned about, everyone staring, you can kindly, politely say, excuse me, my child is struggling right now. Just to kind of acknowledge that, hey, my child is struggling and I'm kind of dealing with it.
Yeah. Have you ever had to deal with that with your daughter in public, like a meltdown, and how did you handle it?
Literally, it was more along taking her out. It was like a event, and it was a lot of bright lights, rides, and she got so overstimulated. We had to actually take her to like a quieter area and have her kind of take a deep breath, kind of calmed down. And then once she was regulated, we decided that, decided she was ready to go back, which for her, I was very proud of her. But other times, if it was way too much, then we would find something else to do.
Okay. Great advice too. Um, as parents, it's our job when they're young, especially, to make them feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also our job to help our children to learn to live without us, like to be independent. Because we need to do that also from a young age, starting teaching them everything from how to fold clothes, whatever it is, match socks, whatever they can do that's age appropriate, and as they grow. Because you don't know, we don't know when our last day on earth is, and you could just appear and have to go live with someone else. So I always say, not that to be morbid or anything, but we should always keep in mind that someone else may have to watch your child, not for that reason even, or just as a babysitter. And it's good that they have this independence. So our goal is to raise them to be independent one day, even if it's 18. And a lot of focus is on early childhood with autistic children. But what should Black parents be preparing for as their autistic children grow into teens and adults?
So first and foremost, transition planning should start early, like as early as middle school. Work with your child's school, like if they have an IEP in progress, like if they are receiving special education services, the school should be starting those transition services as early as 13 or 14 years old, depending on the school system. And in those IEP goals, they should have life skills, job skills, social supports leading to adulthood, or some of the things that as a parent you want to focus on. And also in helping with those transitional support services, looking or considering community supports, like looking at like your state's disability or social services programs that might support transition to adulthood as well. Because I know here in Connecticut, they have a wait list. So the sooner the better that you can get your child on those wait lists when they're younger. So by the time they do get into like those teenage years, hopefully they'll be able to start receiving some of those services as well.
And you find out about these services through the school when you're doing IEP meetings?
So this is two different resources. So for the school has their set of transitional support services. And sometimes in the school, they may actually have partnerships with outside agencies that might help with like those job skills. Mm-hmm. But outside of the school, from a community standpoint, there are there may be like state-based programs like the Department of Developmental Disabilities. Like here in Connecticut, they have like an autism unit with the Department of Developmental Services. So I would look into like your state Department of Social Services or disabilities programs and seeing what they offer as far as transition services. And another resource that is also helpful with transition planning and actually all different type of ages is Autism Speaks. They have like it's like 211, our information line, where they have autism navigators where you can call or you can look online, and they have like transition planning resources by state as well, in addition to other services. Yeah.
Okay. So parents, if you have a young child with autism, start thinking about them transitioning into adulthood now. As you said, there's some wait lists. Like how early would you say, like in your area, would you have to get on a wait list to get transitional services so that they can continue on after they get out of school?
So it depends. I've seen some parents, like here in Connecticut, they applied for like a disability waiver and DDS as early as like elementary school, like 8 years old. And then I've seen where like some parents, they actually applied like in middle school around the same time that they were working on like transition planning for their child. But I would say, honestly, I would reach out because each program might have a limit. They might have an age limit, and find out what the age requirements are to apply.
Okay, let's talk about money financially.
Yeah.
Because that's a big deal, like especially as these kids get to be grown. What should families start doing early to prepare financially and legally, guardianship, benefits, et cetera, for their child's long-term future, especially when their parents are no longer around? It's difficult to think about, but we got to think about that. What happens when the parents are no longer here and the child outlives the parent?
Mhm.
How do we plan for that? And we don't want to. We don't want to think about it. But how do we get past that and do something about it?
So similar to transition services, you want to start early to kind of take some of that stress off of you as a parent. And also, when you start early, it gives you more options for the future. So one of the resources I would say is to look into what they call a financial advisor, but make sure that they specialize in special needs planning to explore like savings options as well as like long-term financial strategies. And on the legal side of things, you may want to also consider consulting what they call a special needs planning attorney or estate attorney. And they can help with things like guardianship, special needs trusts, just to make, and they also can maybe help with determining the eligibility for your child for benefits.
And what happens when a family is in poverty or just can't afford, middle class, can't afford to hire a financial advisor, and they still have to think about what happens to my son, my daughter that's autistic if something happens to me? Is there any recourse for them?
So there may be some programs like care coordination for is a program here in Connecticut, and I believe they have them in different states too. So there may be some community resource programs where that they can also help connect families to resources, but it's like through grant funding. So it's kind of like they can help with the supports, but it might be based on grant money, or they might do like a sliding ski or a sliding fee scale where if the family has low income, they either pay like a low fee or they might get it for free.
Right. But what happens to their kids if something happens to them?
So that is a good question.
Mhm.
And that's something that I really don't have an answer to at this moment
Yeah,
that I
I'm just
can
wondering what
provide.
happens. Like that, I mean, I know you don't have an answer, but if
Yeah.
you don't have money and something happens to you and you have an autistic child, where do they go? Do they to put them in group homes? Like what? I mean, and then if you don't plan ahead of time because you don't have money, or um, this is, I just wonder. You know, I'm sorry, I know you don't have an answer, but I'm just curious about that. But it's good to think about, and it's the point here, I think, is that parents, we need to still think about it, even though it's a hard thing to come to terms with.
And now that you mentioned it, what happens to the kids? I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, like planning early, like establishing a will, and having those plans in place. So, God forbid, if something did happen, there's like someone that's assigned to help support that child. So it's not left up to the states.
Right. Let's talk about finding culturally competent providers,
Mhm.
because not all providers are the same. Not all providers understand what Black families are going through, especially now today. What red flags should parents watch out for when choosing a therapist or a school, even to ensure that the provider is culturally responsive to Black families?
So some red flags for me would be if the provider dismisses your concerns. So if
Mhm.
you're expressing concerns and they're minimizing them, that's red flag number one. Another red flag is, if they're avoiding talking about culture and differences and they want everybody to be the same, that's red flag number two. Another red flag is they take a one size fits all approach. So they don't individualize treatment. Everybody gets the same thing. It's all based on them and the family is not involved in the care or in the planning. That's a red flag. But on a positive note, I know we're talking about red flags, but some things to also consider when looking for a provider or school is like if the team is willing to listen and incorporate, parent or caregiver input, is a good thing, or if they're inquiring about your family's culture and beliefs at the beginning of treatment. And also looking at the culture and climate, like is diversity welcomed? Is it shown in staff or the materials? Is another thing to kind of consider as well.
Right. Oh no, that's awesome advice. Let's talk about introducing your child and your child with autism and their needs to other people that's not immediate family. Like, let's start with teachers,
Mhm.
because I know we had some experience with that where I told the teacher that, like, my grandson's autistic, his triggers. We even sent over his last IEP, and none of it was even probably looked at first until they had behavior problems with him because they like poked his triggers, you know. Um, and we had told them, well, one of his triggers is food, because as I mentioned earlier, you can't just take a snack away without giving him a timer or warning and say, "Oh, time's up." Got most kids are triggered by that, but he's really triggered. You try to take his food away. Um, so how do we introduce at the beginning of his school year, back to school now? How do we introduce our child with autistic? What's the proper way to do that? The best practice to do that with teachers?
So it's a couple of different things. I mean, when you're having like an informal conversation with the teacher or the school team, it's helpful to kind of reach out to them early on in the school year. And as a parent, you definitely don't want to be afraid to discuss what works well for your child as well as what doesn't work well for your child. So like what you were mentioning, like the triggers, what works well as far as calming strategies, and how do they learn? Like my child might learn better with visual supports as opposed to being told instructions. We have to break things down for them. I think too, like having that conversation early, but also if your child is receiving special education services or has accommodations under a 504 plan, you as a parent can request a meeting at the beginning of the school year with the whole school team to kind of look at to kind of discuss the new school year, what's working well with your child, what's not. And if you're involved already with outside providers, incorporating them also in this conversation, because collaboration goes a long way, where he or she might have like a behavior plan or some type of cheat sheet or plan that you guys follow at home that can also be shared among school staff.
Okay. Now that's great. That's with professionals. But now let's talk about with babysitters or even extended family. How can we introduce them and their needs in a way that sets everyone up for success?
Yep. I would say to definitely have that conversation about what works well for your child, what doesn't, and even create like a cheat sheet. Like I find that,
I like that.
quick cheat sheets go a long way. It says, what my child likes, what they don't like, what are my child's allergies. If my child is getting overstimulated, give them access to a quiet space or area or their tangible item. So it's like written and it's like a plan. And then I would ask them if they have any questions or concerns. And in that way, you're also letting them know not only verbally, but also visually. You're giving them a visual cheat sheet because now it's kind of there and it can be helpful.
I'm going to tell you what I'm a visual person. So as soon as you said that, I visualized a laminated sheet with icons and
Yep.
saying food, this, that, just like in 2 columns and triggers, what to do, what not to do. I don't, and laminate it and give it to her, plus follow up with an email. Like that's all that came to mind. Like that way the teacher can have it on their desk. It's laminated. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So when he gets like this, do this, I can see that. I love that idea. Just followed up with an email and hopefully they listen, because sometimes they don't listen, but that's great for a babysitter too. You can put that on the fridge. Yeah, no, that's a great idea. A little cheat sheet. So you guys are going to hear that. And for those who just started coming on toward the end of the show, just so you know, this is available. This broadcast is available on our Facebook page when we're done, and it'll be available on our YouTube live channel. Like you'll see the live tab on our YouTube channel. It's all Successful Black Parenting. You can find us in both places, and you can play it from the beginning and find out all this good stuff you missed. FOMO, you missed a lot, but you're just tuning in, and it was some good stuff. So go back and replay it, share it with somebody who you know could use this information. So, Alicia, how can our audience follow your journey and learn from your work and connect with your resources? Tell us where to find you.
So you guys can find me on LinkedIn as myself, Alicia Simpson Watt. Also on Instagram, it's Leading with Alicia. And then also for information and resources, you can also check out our website for Collaborative ABA Services at www.collaborativaabaservices.com. And on there, we are on LinkedIn under Collaborative ABA Services, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And on YouTube, we have a Collab Talk series that talks about autism and everything in between for information and resources as well.
No, that's fantastic. And Alicia, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. We learned a lot of information, and I think it's going to be really helpful. It's really practical for parents.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And a big shout out to all of you watching the replay of this episode of Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting. Be sure to follow us on social media. We need you there. We really need you. We need you to be engaged with our stuff so that way, we can rise and grow and be successful too. Click on everything on our website, follows, likes, and ads. Even if you don't buy anything, it helps us to thrive. And until next time, I wish you all the best and much success. Take care, and thank you for listening, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Back Talk by Successful Black Parenting Magazine. We'll see you soon.